How do storytellers, screenwriters, and filmmakers come up with new ideas? And where do they get their inspiration from? How does filmmaking inspiration even work? Well, I'll explain where I get my ideas from and give some specific examples in this video. It's not as mysterious as you might think. And by the end of this video, you might be inspired to write your own screenplay or make your own film. My name is Jay Sherer, and I'm a screenwriter, a director, and a film producer. I recently directed a paranormal thriller about UFOs titled Disclosure that's coming out on this channel on November 1st. In today's video, I'll share my inspiration behind Disclosure and how I come up with new ideas for films, and how you can too. Okay, so why make a video about this topic? Why talk about filmmaking inspiration at all? In my opinion, it's worth considering how movies get made. How do studios and or investors choose to make films? How do they choose to greenlight some films over others? And one of the things that you'll hear if you're operating in or around the filmmaking industry, even if you're just a film fan in general, one of the things that you hear all the time is we want new, original film ideas. And yet, Hollywood continues to make sequels, prequels, remakes, or films based off successful video games or books. So if fans want new, original films, why would Hollywood primarily make films based on known properties? The answer here is very simple. Hollywood is looking for an existing audience. If a book, a graphic novel, a video game, or even a doll, like the Barbie movie, sold millions of units and was beloved by fans, if any of those things sold a bunch of units and fans just love them, those same fans are more likely to show up to see the film based off that property than they are to risk paying money for something that they've never seen or heard of. Pre-existing products have an existing target market, which makes marketing the film easier. Studios reduce their risk because the likelihood of people showing up to purchase tickets is far greater than if they were to fund a film that's completely original. So, what can independent filmmakers or filmmakers with original concepts do to alleviate this problem? The first option I have here is to base your film or film concept or idea on something popular. Now, what am I talking about? Well, with Disclosure, I found myself listening to hours upon hours of podcasts where interviewees were talking about UFOs, UAPs, aliens, and all of the associated paranormal phenomena. And it's not just podcasters talking about UFOs and aliens. Even political figures are holding hearings about what critical figures know about the topic. Not to mention that aliens and UFOs have been popular for decades. When I was a kid, we had the X-Files, Independence Day, and Men in Black, just to name a few properties. I grew up around this topic, and the topic is still popular today. So for my film, Disclosure, I drew inspiration from ufologists who were being interviewed on podcasts like the Danny Jones podcast, the Julian Dory podcast, the Sean Ryan Show, or even Joe Rogan's podcast. These podcast interviewers were inviting UFO experts, ufologists, onto their show, and I was listening to all of it. My characters that are in Disclosure and their viewpoints come from listening to military experts, UFO or UAP experiencers and researchers, and even religious figures. I loved listening to these people on these podcasts, and so do a lot of other people just like me. In other words, I don't own any super popular intellectual property like Marvel or Harry Potter, but I am interested in a topic a lot of people are also interested in. It doesn't guarantee success, but it's better than making a film about a topic that maybe nobody cares about. And I think you can see this in what streaming services are doing as well. Look at how streaming services buy and or create content. They create shows based on popular court cases, true crime, or things that got worldwide newspaper coverage. One of the key questions to ask yourself if you're looking for inspiration for a film project is, what's a topic that millions or maybe even billions of people care about that also inspires me? The question that I kept coming back to as I was thinking about disclosure and making this film, the question I kept coming back to was, I'm hearing all these fascinating and oftentimes conflicting and confusing stories about UFOs, paranormal phenomena, and government secrecy. And I find those stories super compelling. So how do I formulate a story around these interesting characters and their viewpoints? And this isn't a new idea, nor am I alone in using popular topics for filmmaking inspiration. If you listen to the Script Notes podcast, which I recommend that you do, hosted by John August and Craig Mazin, they'll talk oftentimes about news headlines and whether or not those news headlines would make a compelling screenplay. So how do you take a popular topic and then form a story around it? And this is where the work of storytelling actually takes over from just doing basic research. Research and storytelling are two different things. So the key question here is, can you take a popular topic and ensure that you can craft a narrative around it? Things I would look for are things like, is there something about the shared human experience here? Does the topic excite, thrill, or rile people up? What's the shared human experience that we relate to about this topic that we might want to create a film or screenplay around? Also, conflict. What drives the conflict in this story? Do people have conflicting goals or objectives? What does that look like? Character development is also critical and probably one of the more difficult ones to find. Can you showcase a character arc given this particular topic? And if so, how does the character develop? And then lastly, structure. Is there a way to have a beginning, a middle, and an end? Can the 3-act structure be applied to this particular topic? Now, to give you an example, for my film Disclosure, I locked in on the shared human experience early on. What is the shared human experience, like related to UFOs and paranormal phenomena? For me, it's all about this fascination with the unknown. We don't know the truth, which is both confusing and frustrating, but also a little bit thrilling. So how do I capture that and bottle it into a screenplay, given that that's the way I feel and a lot of my friends feel about this particular topic? Fortunately for me, there's plenty of conflict because people have many different takes on what's really going on. Some say it's government technology, some say it's alien technology, some even say that it's spiritual forces. Everyone has a different take, which is perfect when it comes to conflict. Now, character development is a tougher one because it does feel like we need to shape the narrative a little bit differently. But for me, it's a little bit easier because Disclosure is a short film. So our lead character, Audrey, we don't have to take her through a full arc. But in our related feature script, we do, which means we need to come up with a reason that our lead character would go through an arc. And in that script, we follow Audrey's journey as she begins to distrust the elites that are running the government. Now, notice how Audrey's story, the arc of becoming less trusting in these elites that are running a government, notice how that's not necessarily inherent. People hint at it, but it's not necessarily inherent in the topic, which means I'm having to form narrative around that. What does it look like to go from trusting to doubtful to full distrust to full anarchy, right? It's a shaped narrative that I have to create around this character. And it's easy to see how that could happen because the government is definitely hiding information from us. And then there's structure. Now, writing a story about a bunch of different viewpoints that people have on a topic is not a story structure. Structure requires a plot, conflicting objectives, and a beginning, a middle, and an end. Now, this is an area where we really needed to do some work because, yes, we could tell specific UFO experience or stories, which do have a beginning, a middle, and an end, but we were more on the disclosure side. So we had to work our own narrative into what does it mean to get disclosure? What does it mean to unearth disclosure? How do we find out who really knows the truth? We needed to shape that narrative given the topic that we were addressing. And you might need to do the same for your idea. Here's another thing that I would argue, and this isn't so much about inspiration, but it is about the question of, is this thing something that you should produce or that you're going to try and rally other people to producing around you, whether it's a studio, whether it's investors, whatever. And that is, think about the economic side of the equation of filmmaking. Studios, investors, they don't want to make movies that don't make money, right? It's a losing proposition. They want to make money on these things, even if it's just so that they can create the next film. So let's play with this equation. If a film costs $100 million to make and makes $100 million at the box office, that's not a profitable film. $100 million at the box office is impressive, but not if you spent $100 million to make the film. That means that it was not profitable. But a film that costs $10 million to make and makes $100 million at the box office, that's a film that made 10x its production budget. It's going to make you instantly more credible in Hollywood, and more people are going to want to work with you because you know how to take a dollar figure and maximize that dollar figure in terms of return on investment. So another way storytellers can reduce studio or investor risk while still going after original ideas is by reducing the production budget of their project. Now, what does it mean? What causes films to have bigger budgets, and how should we think about that? Well, let me present some ideas to you. Writing with fewer locations in mind. Locations cost a lot of money. Shifting production from one location to another can cost a lot of money. Or you can reduce the number of characters in the script. The more characters you have, the more it costs because you're going to have to pay all of those people money. Now, you can set the story in a more contemporary setting that doesn't require building sets or getting a huge budget dedicated to wardrobe or costuming. One of the biggest ones, especially when you're dealing with like a science fiction type topic like I am, is limiting the number of special effects required. Because obviously special effects cost a lot of money. Now, for my last film, No Vacancy, the poster's here on the wall, we had a much larger budget. But for disclosure, our budget was like a fourth of what we spent on No Vacancy. And that meant setting the film in one location and setting it up to where we didn't need a production designer. We did have 9 characters in the script, which is a lot of characters for a short film, but most of the conflict and intrigue come from those characters. So I didn't feel like I could cut any of them out of the film. But we did choose to shoot on an iPhone with moment lenses, which was far less expensive. I will do a video about our experience shooting on iPhone if you guys would like to see it, so leave me a comment down below. Now, there were 3 areas where I knew I needed to spend a little bit more money in order to get the best production quality, and that was lighting, sound, and wardrobe. Everything else was very simple, but I knew we needed to have an excellent gaffer, a great sound recorder, and someone who could get us some excellent wardrobe choices because our film is a period piece. We shot at one location. We also shot the story as it taking place in 1966, but we intentionally didn't make that a core element of production design. We had 9 characters and we had 0 special effects. There are no special effects in this entire film, which means we were able to fund disclosure ourselves. Now, short films aren't going to make a bunch of money, so we needed to reduce budget more so because we didn't have any money, as opposed to, the fact that it's going to make a bunch of money somewhere else. Now, I will say this, the feature script that's associated with our proof of concept short will require investors, but my intent is that the script comes in below the $5 million mark in terms of anticipated production budget. Now, hopefully that means less risk for investors while still maintaining a very compelling sci-fi story based on an intriguing concept. Now, you and I can't make a film that includes Marvel characters or Star Wars characters, but that doesn't mean we can't write stories that still have a built-in audience. We just need to shape narratives around a shared human experience and a compelling, popular topic. If you're like me and you love thinking about UFOs and the paranormal phenomenon that are associated with them, or if you're a fan of science fiction, make sure you're subscribed to this channel so you can watch Disclosure on November 1st, 2025. Did I miss anything about filmmaking inspiration? If you have a question I didn't address, or you have another idea for a future topic, please leave your thoughts in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, and when it comes to UFO disclosure, who knows the truth? Disclosure is coming November 1st.